Hey guys, how's it going? It's Al. Week 16 of the NFL Daily Fantasy DFS season is here, and I've got a first look for you on Draftkings. Incredible. It's gone by really fast. The last 4 months have just flown by, at least for me. I hope that they've gone by quickly for you. I hope you had some good weeks. Hopefully you had a winning season. We're going to take another first look. We're going to go through this week. I have not spent a lot of time researching. I have not done anything. We kind of looked at it with the chat on Twitch for a couple of minutes before we started recording this video, but this is my first look at everything that is going to come down in week 16 on DraftKings. We're going to go through position by position. I'm going to break down some players. We're going to try to put together a lineup. Please don't take the lineup too seriously. Everything is going to change as we get Wednesday, Thursday, Friday practice reports. My Best Buys article comes out every Thursday. I've got multiple podcasts that come out that day as well as the lineup builder show that you guys really love every Friday right here on YouTube. This is going to be a ton of content. This first look is just an exercise to kind of go through each position and come through with some of the players that I think are in advantage spots. I'll try and fill out a dummy lineup, a filler lineup, a reserve lineup, something that can hold the place, a placeholder, if you will, as we go through and get to the end of the week. And things will obviously change. Some things will stay the same though, because some value is just going to be as good on Sunday morning as it is now, and hopefully some of these plays will help you guys in the way that you think moving forward. If you would be so kind, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, ring that notifications bell. Let's take a look at this slate. Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens still have the #1 seed to play for. They are 1 game ahead of the New England Patriots going into week 16. They still have to rack up some wins. They did catch an L the first time they played Cleveland in Baltimore. But Lamar Jackson is 1,000 more, for good reason, is 1,000 more than any other quarterback on DraftKings for week 16. You can pair him with his wide receivers. You don't have to pair him with his wide receivers in tournaments. So if I'm building groups on DraftKings, I'm still going to build groups around him, his pass catchers, obviously Hollywood Brown, all of his tight ends, because I think that they're in play, whether it's Andrews or Boyle or Hurst. They're going to be in that group, and we'll rank them according to what their projections are. Maybe even Miles Boykin, Seth Roberts, whoever you want to throw into that group. But I'm not going to make sure that I have exactly 2 of his pass catchers. I'll say at least 0, right? So if the optimizer finds a way to throw in his pass catchers into those Lamar Jackson lineups that I want it to make for me, if it wants to include one of his pass catchers, it can, because we've seen him have big days. 26 points here with 1 touchdown passing, 28 points here, 1 touchdown passing, 26 points against Seattle, 0, 0 against Kansas City, 21 points, 2 touchdowns only against Arizona, 33 DraftKings points that day. He can get it done with or without his wide receivers having a tournament winning day. And we also know that he's had 5 touchdowns against the Jets, 5 touchdowns against the Rams, 4 against Houston. So he can also have those days where he has you a game, the type of game that can win you a tournament, and his pass catchers need to be stacked with him as well. So when you're building your groups, at least keep that in mind. You don't have to have pass catchers with him. You can if you want to. I leave it up to the optimizer to build those, and then I go through them I look at each single one of those lineups and say, do I have enough allocation of those plays? I don't know that I want them for this first look lineup. You can. We don't have enough value yet on this slate to warrant sacrificing the volume that we can get from the 3 running backs, as well as some of the value wide receivers. He is most certainly in play, but I'm not going to put him in this lineup. Russ Wilson is going to grade out as one of the better plays because he's playing against Arizona, and they just tune up every single thing. They have allowed more points to opposing quarterbacks than their averages, more points to the opposing running backs, wide receivers, and especially tight ends than the league average, and then those players' averages. Teams and players have their best days against Arizona with the way that they defend, which is they just don't defend. This game does have a solid total. The Seahawks are favored in this game. It is one of the later games. Game total of 50. Seahawks favored by 9.5 points, so a team total of 29.5 implied for Russ Wilson. The question is, and we'll take a look at the salaries as we get down the list, do you go for Metcalf, who's been outstanding? Do you go for the big play with Tyler Lockett? Do you go for Hollister and try and attack the flow chart and say, look, if a tight end's playing against Arizona, you just play the tight end? Or do you realize that they're going to give the ball 20 to 30 times to Chris Carson, but he's seen a massive price increase? For tournaments, I love Russ Wilson, and I'm going to put a whole bunch of different stacks together with him, single and double, as well as bringbacks from Arizona with Drake and with Kirk and everything else. But again, I like to spend down at quarterback for the benefit of this first look. Drew Brees on the road against Tennessee in a very hotly contested and high totaled game. Tannehill is the fourth or the fifth? He's the fourth highest quarterback. If I told you coming into the year that in week 16, Ryan Tannehill would be the fourth highest quarterback on a slate, and you would be considering playing him heavily, would you believe me? He's been outstanding since taking over this job. 6,600. He was 6,500 last week against Houston. Paid off that salary. 6,600. I think he's possible to pay off this salary at 6,600, especially against New Orleans, who has not been that great at limiting opposing quarterbacks and their scoring ability. And with Derrick Henry maybe being a little bit dinged up right now, he's fine for me as well. Dak Prescott against Philly. We've attacked Philly through the air all season long. I don't see why that's going to stop. I like this game from a stacking point of view. And we do kind of have to consider who we're going to play with him. Gallup coming off of a bad day. Amari Cooper has some severe home road splits with Dak Prescott since being on the Cowboys. Cobb has been up and down. We don't really want to stack with somebody like Witten because he's kind of capped based on the amount of touches that he gets, but big playability all over the place, and Philadelphia has not done a great job at stopping opposing wide receivers. Matt Ryan up against Jacksonville, who's been an absolute dumpster fire for the last 6 to 7 weeks in terms of stopping opponents. They just allow so many points. Matt Ryan has thrown for 300 yards multiple times this year. In fact, the majority of his games that he has started have ended with him getting that 300-yard bonus and multiple touchdowns. He's in play for me at 6,200. I like that he's come down from that middle 6K range. But I think we're going to look a little bit cheaper. Carson Wentz against Dallas at 5,800. Don't mind him at all. The loss of the wide receivers on this team has not resulted in Carson Wentz having worse numbers. He has thrown the ball a little bit more to Miles Sanders. He's thrown the ball a lot more to Greg Ward on the outside. And he's really peppered his tight ends, Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, with a ton of targets. And his efficiency has gone up. His accuracy is struggled this year, but over the last 4 weeks has been solid. And he's got 3 straight games of over 22 DraftKings points at 5,800, going up against Dallas here in the latest game on the slate with a closely contested game. Cowboys favored by 2.5 and a 47 team total. Most certainly in play for me, but I want to attack this Detroit team with Denver being at home. It is a lower total. If you want to get up to Wentz, I'm fine with that. If you're not comfortable with Drew Lock and you'd rather play Rivers, I'm fine with that. But based on where I'm going to go with this lineup, I'm going to plug in Drew Lock at 5,600. There are a couple of cheaper guys that I think are in play that we'll talk about in just a minute. But I'm going to plug in Drew Lock here because I just want to attack Detroit as bad as they've been against opposing quarterbacks. At 4,700, you've got Haskins going up against the Giants, who have been equally bad against quarterbacks. Haskins coming off of a 20-point day on DraftKings. He does have a great wide receiver. You guys know how much I've gushed over Terry McLaurin this year. I think the kid is an absolute stud and continuing to mature, and had a great touchdown and a big game this past week in week 15. If you believe that he can have another big day and you think that Haskins is going to benefit, my problem with Haskins is he's been really bad at being consistent. Okay, he hasn't been great, and he's had some moments, but he's missed McLaurin more than he's hit him when the kid's been wide open. So if I want to get shares of this Redskins game, it's probably going to be more with McLaurin than Haskins Jr., but he's super cheap. And then we had a quarterback change for Carolina, and it did not affect the total in this game, as Will Grier expected to make his first start for Carolina here at 4,300 only, going up against Indy. They are not favored. The total is 46.5 here at 4,300. Grier does not really have to do all that much, and he has some great weapons at his disposal with easy dump offs to Christian McCaffrey. Great playmaker there, obviously. DJ Moore, who has definitely come into his own. Big playmaker on the outside. Good at catching those short passes and turning them into bigger gains. Solid tight end play and at least athleticism if Olsen is out again, with Ian Thomas, who ran a bunch of routes, like the 4th most routes per drop back in week 15. If he gets Greg Olsen back, ultra professional player, gotta love him as well. And Curtis Samuel can get deep and stretch defense. So It's not always the quarterback. It's sometimes the tools that are around him. And if Will Grier can just do okay at 4,300, if he gets you 16 plus DraftKings points, you're more than fine with the amount of salary that he leaves you on the table. I'm going to roll the dice with Drew Lock here, and let's move on to the running backs. All the way up at the top is Christian McCaffrey. I'm plugging him in. I don't care. He's too damn good. He had 0 touchdowns in week 15. Still had 37.5 DraftKings. Sorry, he had 2 touchdowns in week 15. Still had 37.5 points. Had no touchdowns in week 14. 24.5 points. This guy's an absolute machine. And though the team has nothing to play for itself, there's no team goals. There are records in play for Christian McCaffrey in terms of yards from scrimmage, chasing down Chris Johnson, CJ2K's record for yards from scrimmage, as well as chasing down a 1,000 season for rushing and receiving yards. He had 88 receiving yards last game, putting him at a total of 1,300 rushing yards and 814 receiving yards, leaving him with what, 186 yards to go receiving. And with the amount of targets that he's getting, with a ridiculous 34 targets over the last 3 games, and now a quarterback that's a rookie, and they're probably going to script in a bunch of checkdowns and screens and little toss plays to him to just get him those easy catches and let him get yards, because I think they want this player to get that 1,000 season, that 1K, as well as have an opportunity to maybe chase down, if he can bust a big play, the CJ2K record for scrimmage yards in a season. You can chase that narrative. I'm just chasing the volume and all the usage. 18 touchdowns, just an absolutely ridiculous fantasy player this year. Has been Christian McCaffrey. Looking at some other running backs, Saquon Barkley had a great game for us, but saw his price rise from 7,700 to 8,300, and he is not playing the Miami Dolphins, although Washington has not been good. If you want to ride the Saquon Barkley train again this week, I'm fine with it, but I think there's better value out there. Ezekiel Elliott has come up in price as well to 7,900. You know you're going to get the usage around the goal line. He has piled in 12 touchdowns. He has been great the last 3 weeks with 20, 23, and 34 points. 7,900 might be too cheap, but Philly is a tough team against running backs. That front 7 is very good. I usually want to attack Philly with wide receivers. I understand if you just want to ride the volume with Ezekiel Elliott, but as I said, I think that there's cheaper plays that can be had. Chris Carson has seen a ridiculous $2,500 price rise in the last 2 weeks, from 6K in week 14 to 8,500 here in week 16, partially because of how aggressively DraftKings prices players up when they play Arizona to make them not plug and play players. I think that Chris Carson is a pay up to be contrarian play here. One, because you know he's going to get volume. He's favored and at home, which time tested, back tested methods will show usually produce above average or above expectation results for running backs who get the ball 20 plus times. He definitely projects to get it in the mid 20s. If you want to play Chris Carson, fine, but know that you're not going to get the same sort of a floor with Chris Carson as you're going to get from a heavily involved pass game running back like a Leonard Fournette, like a Christian McCaffrey, or even somebody like Saquon Barkley, who has seen way less targets and catches this season than he saw before, but still more than Chris Carson. Derrick Henry, same sort of a situation as him. Alvin Kamara against Tennessee. Hard to pay that $7,500 for me for Alvin Kamara with the price where it's at outside of tournaments. If you want him in your cash game lineups, I don't think that this is the right way to go about doing it. If you want to play him in tournaments, I'm always fine with playing somebody with his ceiling in tournaments, but he just is not getting the carries inside the 5 to get you consistency with touchdowns, and we're reliant on him busting a big play, which he has not done as much this year as he has in years past. I believe that the volume and the value is in the 6 to 7K range. Joe Mixon going up against Miami, which always is going to boost somebody's efficiency, but they haven't priced up Joe Mixon as aggressively as they've priced up Saquon Barkley last week, or as aggressively as they've priced up Chris Carson this week going up against Arizona. Miami just does nothing but produce points, and the Cincinnati Bengals offense has not been outstanding, but they have done one thing over the last month and a half, and that's just pound the ball with Joe Mixon. 25 carries and 3 catches against New England in a loss. 23 carries and 3 catches in a loss against Cleveland. In the win against the Jets, 23 touches. If I'm going to get mid-20s touches with 3 to 4 catches mixed in there to give me a little bit of a floor with the increased touchdown equity that you get for a running back playing up against Miami, 6,600 just is not enough. I'm going to go pile in Joe Mixon just like they're piling carries on him. And I'm going to plug a third running back in here, and it's going to be Marlon Mack. I get it. I know you hate him. I know. But Carolina has been that bad. As much resistance as we got last week for Chris Carson at 7,500 because he's not really utilized all that much in the Seattle passing game. Home favored running back with a massive offensive line versus defensive line advantage, and a team that's allowing 140 plus yards the last 5 weeks to opposing running backs on the ground. This does look like it could be an explosion spot for Marlon Mack. Now, if you don't want to play him, I'm sure there's other values that you can find as the week goes on to avoid playing Marlon Mack, but at 6,200, as I said, the comp for me for him is theoretically is somebody like Chris Carson. If you believe that this is a game that they are not going to have to throw the ball, and I don't believe that this is going to be a game where they have to throw the ball, and we should see usage like we saw against Pittsburgh and against Miami, this is a spot where I want to buy on Marlon Mack. Even though Marlon Mack did not come through with massive points in those games, he was priced at 7,000 against Miami and only 6,200 against Carolina, who's been one of the worst teams at stopping running backs for the last 6 weeks. So I'm going to plug him in my flex spot. All 3 running backs play in the morning, or for me the morning. I'm on the West Coast, guys, so give me a break as far as that's concerned. The only legitimate time zone is the West Coast. Thomas is somebody I want to play at home. We don't have his Monday night stats because we're producing this video at 11:45 on the West Coast, the only legitimate time zone, on Monday morning. So they do play a home game on Monday Night Football. They travel on the road here to play the Tennessee Titans. He will have an advantage over these Titans cornerbacks who were massively hurt in week 15. They will have to see what they get back in week 16, but Michael Thomas can't guard Mike, obviously his Twitter handle, but it's real. You just can't guard him. But as Drew Brees goes, so does Michael Thomas, and 19 fantasy points on the road versus 30 plus average at home. The home road splits are certainly tied to his quarterback's ability to get on the ball. Doesn't mean that he can't have a big game on the road. It's just a little bit less likely, and with the price all the way up at 9,300, I think that he's viable in tournaments, but probably not my play for cash games. Tyler Lockett priced up against Arizona here at the 7,600. We saw the price hike there. We know that they have one of the highest implied team totals. If you want to pair him with Russ Wilson, I'm fine with that. Julio Jones coming off of a ridiculous 20 target game, and he had 41 points. Amazing that when you get the ball or throw it towards one of the most or the most talented wide receivers in the league, that he posts a monster game. Shocking. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that if you just palled the ball to Julio Jones, he would be great? And Jacksonville has struggled a lot. I love Julio Jones for tournaments this week. I don't know that I can afford him in this lineup, but if some value opens up, we'll be fine with that. AJ Brown has seen a massive increase in his workload. From the beginning of the season, when he was seeing 3 or 4 kind of yo-yoing up and down, they realized that they have to get the ball to him, and Tannehill really trusts this kid. Threw him 13 times last week, his high in terms of volume on the season. 3 out of his last 4 games have resulted in a 100-yard bonus on DraftKings. But now he's got a bit of a tougher matchup against New Orleans. Can you trust AJ Brown this week with Lattimore out there and with this New Orleans defense? We'll see. They do have a high team total. It is more that you attack this team with slot receivers than with outside receivers, but AJ Brown might just be a different cat, and you might want to go out with him. But for me, I played Drew Lock so I could get to a specific guy. I've also talked about how much I like McLaurin. If you're going to play Giants in this spot and you want to come back or bring back guy, Terry McLaurin is fine as a standalone, a one-off, or if you're playing him as a part of a Giants bring back stack, I'm fine with him. Love the talent. But Courtland Sutton is another player that I love the talent, and I love picking on the Detroit Lions. We just saw them give up 3 touchdowns to Rashad Perriman and 100 plus yards to Chris Godwin and 450 yards through the air to Jameis Winston. And Courtland Sutton, in wins and in losses, has really contributed this season. A big breakout year for the kid. We've seen ceiling games from him. As long as I believe that he's going to get 8+ targets in this spot, 6,200 is not enough because of the matchup against Detroit. Very talented player, getting good volume. Price isn't high enough. I'm going to plug him in. And then we got to find some value. And guess what, guys? First of all, DK Metcalf, before I get down to the value plays, also in play for those stacks. Only 5,900. We're going to get some exposure to this Seattle offense. But I guess you know where it's going to come from. As good as the value worked out for us last week, this might change. If DJ Chark comes back, then I'm not going to be projecting as many targets for Chris Conley as we projected for him with DJ Chark out. He started slow. He ended fast. 2 touchdowns in week 15 for us. I'm going to run it back because 4,300 isn't enough if Chark misses once again. And Greg Ward Jr., I'm going to run it back with him too. He was min salary last week and got 9 targets. He was min salary the week before and got 9 targets. There's just nobody else to throw to for Carson Wentz. And 4,200 is still a value if you project 7 to 10 targets for a $4,200 player. Now, I do not believe that he has big playability, right? This is not a player that's going to get behind a defense. This is a dink and dunk sort of player, but they have shown trust, and Wentz has shown trust at getting Greg Ward some end zone targets. And in terms of wide receiver production, if you're going to get red zone and end zone targets, that is the easiest way to get touchdowns. It's much more difficult to complete a 40-yard pass for a touchdown than it is to complete a 4-yard pass for a touchdown, where the guy just has to come down with the pass. And Greg Ward has shown the ability to come down with catches in traffic, especially in the end zone, for the Philadelphia Eagles since he's been pressed into play at 4,200. I'm going to plug him into this first look. That leaves us with 3,400 at tight end. You can pay up, and it worked out last week. Zach Ertz has been a target monster for this Philadelphia Eagles team since they lost all their wide receivers. If you want to pay up to 6,400 against Dallas, who has struggled against opposing tight ends, I get it. I'm fine with it. Darren Waller has been very good. 23 DraftKings points last week, 20 against Kansas City. Massive splits for him if Hunter Renfrow is out. So if Renfrow remains out and you want to attack this Chargers team, the Chargers do have the ability to stop the tight end, but the Raiders really don't have the ability to throw it basically anywhere else. So high target floor here for Darren Waller this week. If you want to go with him, fine, but we don't have the money to pay for it in this lineup. Carolina's been very bad all over the place. Jack Doyle, only 4,500. But Jacob Hollister scratches an itch, at least as far as I'm concerned. If you have a tight end that you project to get over 4 or more targets against the Arizona Cardinals, I believe that you should play that tight end if the salary is enough to warrant it. Because on the season, tight ends that have gotten 4 or more targets against this team, against this Arizona Cardinals team, have averaged 17.3 DraftKings points per game. So the first thing we see is in the last game, Hollister only saw 3 targets. Fine, I understand that. 6 against the Rams, 8 against Minnesota, 4 against Philly, 10 against San Francisco, 6 against Tampa Bay. Ever since they lost the tight end that was in front of him, Will Disley, Jacob Hollister has been on the field and has been running routes per dropback and has been targeted a very good amount for a tight end. Now he's facing the least efficient team at defending tight ends, and just like the last 2 weeks, they've priced up that tight end from his mid 3K range to 4,200. But we've seen, even against Minnesota, he's been priced at 4,100, 4,300. He's been priced as somebody, once he had this big game against San Francisco, that should be in this range and should be priced here, as opposed to guys like Vance McDonald, who should be a $3,200 or $3,300 tight end, as opposed to David Njoku, who was a coach's decision DNP in week 15, who should have been priced at around 32 or 3,000 or 3,300. And Ricky Seals-Jones, who stepped in at 3,200, didn't run any routes, got I think he ran like 12 or 14 routes last week, but caught 2 touchdowns because of how bad Arizona is at defending tight ends in the red zone and in the end zone. And now we have a kid who's actually targeted, who's actually got a role in an offense, who should see 4 or more targets. I'm not saying he's going to have 17 DraftKings points, but the floor is higher for Jacob Hollister in week 16 than it ever was for Vance McDonald in week 14 or for David Njoku in week 15. Jacob Hollister at 4,200. If they're going to be as aggressive at pricing up tight ends against Arizona like they've priced up Chris Carson, Hollister should be about 4,800 or 4,900. So I'm going to take the discount of where I think his price over where I think his price should be and attack this Arizona team the same way that we've been attacking them all season long. Leaves us 2,600 for a defense. Let's just plug in a random one. Do not care. First look lineup: Drew Lock, Christian McCaffrey, Joe Mixon, Courtland Sutton, Chris Conley, Greg Ward Jr., Jacob Hollister, Marlon Mack, and the Cowboys defense. Just as a plug and play, we'll find another value as the week goes on. Leave me a reply down below and let me know, who do you think would be your first player into a lineup for week 16? And I wish you the best of luck this week. Whole lot of content coming out. Drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notifications bell. And until that next video, I'll catch you guys later. Bye.
He's a legend.